Good morning, everybody. My name is James Lett. I'm one of your hosts today. We're just going to let people come in and we'll get started in a minute or two. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Aptem masterclass on making best use of subprograms functionality. We're just going to go through some house rules to start with. So just to make you aware, you will be muted during the session. So if you need assistance, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of GoToWebinar. We will be recording this session and uploading the recording and Q&A to the Aptem Help Center, so you are able to share it with colleagues. And you can ask questions in the question panel on the right-hand side as well. And what we will be doing is answering as many questions as we can during the session. So if you do have any questions, please ask them throughout the session. And we do have an opportunity to answer a number of those questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Any questions that we don't manage to get to, we will follow up on and make sure that all questions that have been submitted are answered. A little bit about the presenters today. So as I said, my name's James. I'm going to be hosting and answering the majority of the questions today. I'm solutions consultant for Aptem, working with internal and external customers to make the most out of Aptem and its functionality. And your main presenter today is going to be Claire Sykes. Claire's worked with a number of higher education institution and independent training providers, helping them deliver apprenticeships throughout England. Claire, over to you.
So good morning, everybody. It's absolutely lovely to have you here with us today, and welcome to today's webinar. We're hoping that today's webinar will be a great session for you, where we will have opportunity to showcase many different solutions to how to integrate sub-programs into your own curriculum. So again, just welcome. So our agenda today, we're looking to cover a few different points. We will start our journey today with a problem with curriculum, or some of the really common issues that we do face as we start to think about curriculum planning. So if you haven't started your curriculum planning yet, or you haven't started to think about your forecast, now is a great time to start thinking about how you can incorporate sub-programs into that next development phase, potentially as you look at those September starts, if that's something that is part of your business model. We will look at a number of Aptem solutions, so considering those problems and how Aptem can present some real valuable solutions that are not only practical solutions. So we'll think about how we can improve efficiencies, but we'll also think about that wider context of the road to outstanding or the road to good with regards to our Ofsted journey, and how we can certainly use sub-programs to be incorporated in our QUIP, looking at that journey to whichever direction we're going in, whether that is good or outstanding. We will take a closer look at some real specific examples of sub-programs. So thinking about really some of the common issues that come up, across the sector really. So we'll look at a qualification outcome, so how we can use sub-programs to include not only mandatory but additional qualifications as well. We'll also look at a compliance related solution. So how we can use sub-programs, and the specific example we're looking at is to use sub-programs to layer in a program that's applicable for learners that require additional learning support, as well as wider opportunities that sub-programs bring. And I have to say, this for me is where it gets really exciting and really interesting. We're seeing some really, just incredibly interesting things now happen across the sector as more and more providers are starting to use sub-programs, and they're moving away from some of the standard things that we would expect as Aptem a client to use it for. We're seeing things like building sub-programs for a sign language course, for example. It's one of the more unusual concepts that I've seen, and I'm really excited to see that come through to fruition. So as we move into the problem with curriculum or some of the challenges that we do face, what I'd encourage you to think about all the way through the webinar is grabbing a pen and paper and thinking about your problems and start to map out potentially how Aptem could be used as a solution for some of those problems that you're encountering. So one of the first things I think about when I think about curriculum is the concept of learner differentiation. So what I'm not thinking about here are minor differences. So I'm not thinking about RPL at this point, or I'm not thinking about a minor difference within a learning plan, which can offer learner differentiation. I'm thinking about the wider context. So if I could give a couple of examples, I'm actually thinking about what happens if I've got learners that require functional skills. What happens if I've got a learner on a pathway that requires a number of different pathways? Because increasingly across the sector, we're seeing standards being developed with a number of different pathway opportunities within them. And following on from that, another challenge that we face when we're building curriculum is level differentiation. And you may ask me and you may think, well, when we build curriculum, we're building at one level. But Aptem actually presents some incredibly useful opportunities within curriculum design. Because what you can actually do is build your main body of your curriculum. Okay, and you can almost aim for a master program, and increasingly we're seeing providers do this. So you would aim for a master program that includes everything you would expect to see across your business. So every apprentice that comes through your door would experience the same thing, for example, and you can standardize many different things within Aptem using those curriculum models. But if we take the example of safeguarding and well-being, this is another area which many providers do want to standardise across the board, and that's absolutely a great option. However, within sub-programs, you can standardise but also provide level differentiation. And the reason I think that's critical is because when we go for that approach, the approach that we take for safeguarding is going to be very different, and the conversation is going to be very different for maybe the younger end of our market compared to a level 6, level 7 leadership and management apprentice. So we can differentiate that particular element of curriculum through applying a standardized approach, but then using sub-programs to offer them differences within what we're building. And of course, I'm going to show you a couple of examples today about how to do this. Following on from that idea, from learner differentiation to level differentiation, we've also got the concept of sector differentiation as well. And once again, sub-programs give us that opportunity to do so. And again, just to give an example, the conversation that we're going to have with potentially a male learner in construction and knowing some of the challenges they face compared to maybe a learner in the health sector, maybe working within the NHS, and thinking about, again, just some of the, if we think about inclusion and diversity, the conversation we need to have with each different person or each different sector is going to be really different. So once again, sub-programs present us with this opportunity to standardize our curriculum but offer sector differentiation. And these 2 points here, so if we think about level differentiation and sector differentiation, are absolutely part of that journey to outstanding when we think about our Ofsted journey. welcome to those people that are just joining us as well. I know we've got a couple of people just joining us late. It's absolutely fine. Just a reminder that everything we're doing is recorded, and you will be able to grab them first couple of moments by just accessing our website after the webinar. So don't worry if you've joined us late, you'll still get access to everything, and welcome. Following on from this, another issue that we do face, another problem, is our contractual obligations with employers that cause us to think about how many different versions of a program we may be required to build. So I'm just going to ask you to think about your own sector, your own market, or your own offer, that's probably a better word, and think about a standard that you have within that offer that includes a qualification outcome, and not a mandatory qualification, an optional, if you don't mind. And within that, you may also, within that qualification, have an award, certificate, or diploma opportunity. So if we take that example, we know that sometimes we have employers that just want the standard, and then we may have employers that either want the standard with the award, and then we've got certificate and diploma, and before we know it, we've got 4 or 5 different versions of the same program. So one of the things that we can do with sub-programs is actually allow the provider to build the main build. So when I think about main build or main configuration, I'm referring to the main aim. So the ZProg and the Zoo code. And then the sub-programs can be used then to build the differences. So an award version, a certificate version, a diploma version. And that does improve your efficiencies as you're building, and because then, as you'll appreciate, when a learner comes through or we've got a contract, we can then layer in whatever is required as per that contract. And it does allow us to build a course incrementally as well. So we're not having to build things all at once, because that sometimes just doesn't make sense for us to do so. If we don't have any contracts drop in with a particular requirement, it doesn't make sense for us to spend the resource on that time at that moment. A really common issue that we face in curriculum is qualification or no qualification. 2 seconds, just going to click something. So yeah, qualification or no qualification. So this isn't referring to, of course, mandated qualifications. It is referring once again to those optional qualifications. So do we build it in the main configuration, or do we build it as a separate sub-program? So just the idea of a sub-program, just the concept, allows us, when we're building our curriculum, to have an option. So we don't have to build a curriculum that has main aim and a qualification. We can just leave our main aim alone and then use a sub-program to layer in these additionalities if required. Additional qualifications are also a consideration when we build curriculum. Without the concept of a sub-program, one of the examples that we can face is the challenge of functional skills. If we didn't have sub-programs and a learner would require functional skills, we would have to build the learning outcomes for functional skills within the main body of our program. That creates a real significant challenge, because as soon as we have a learner that doesn't require functional skills, we've already built that program, and then what do we do with all those activities? We'll end up having to delete them out. Because we have sub-programs, you do not have to do that. You can use sub-programs to build all of those additional qualifications and then only add them to learners that require it. Therefore, once again, just improving efficiencies across the board and making your curriculum just run that bit smoother. And lastly, another thing that I see across the sector, I have to say this isn't as common as some of the other issues, but timetabling is a consideration. If you've ever built curriculum within Aptem, you'll know that this does present a challenge, and I don't think this is specific to Aptem at all. I think this is just across the sector. If you're creating a curriculum that requires specific dates or days, once that date or day has gone and you've built that in a program, then that program becomes obsolete because of course them dates have gone. But sub-programs allow us an opportunity to once again just layer in those dates. So we can leave our main program alone, and that can be our, our fixed entities, things that are never changing. We can put our forecast in terms of our learning, but then we can layer in the dates. And once again, it does just improve efficiencies for those that are building curriculum. So just as we move forward, just a reminder, just encourage you, do think about them challenges. Do think about some of the things that you're facing right now as we start to look at some of these ideas with regards to sub-programs. So we should probably answer this question, because I've gone into what is the problem with curriculum, but what is a sub-program in Aptem? So if you've never come across Aptem before, if you're a new customer, or you may be very early in your implementation, a sub-program is any additionality to the main aim. So if we think about our main aim being the standard, so our ZProg Zoo code, any additionality to that we can use the sub-program functionality to layer in those additionalities. One of the beauties of a sub-program is that it can be added at any point. So it doesn't have to correspond with the overall duration of the program. So if you have, specific elements of a program that have to be achieved in a certain time frame, come across some standards that require, for example, a certain element, dentistry comes to mind, where there is a certain element that has to be achieved in a certain time frame. You could potentially layer that in as a sub-program so that it runs as its own thing in its own time alongside the main aim. So yeah, does not need to correspond with anything. It cannot, though, exceed the overall duration, and that is for ILR purposes, because of course we cannot have an aim that doesn't have an overall aim attached to it within the ILR. So there you go, must be attached to a main aim. So let's think about some of the examples that we see across the sector. And as we progress into the session today, I will be taking you into my own test tenancy, and we will be going live. So don't worry, we are going to look at Aptem and see some of the things that we can achieve within Aptem. Sorry, I was just juggling my screen around for a moment. So sub-programs, what can we do? We can use sub-programs to layer in non-mandatory qualifications. So we've already discussed that a little bit. So the idea of functional skills or an additional qualification aim. Additional qualifications, of course, that's already been mentioned. We can also use it for compliance-related additions. So many providers increasingly are using sub-programs to build anything like this. So the example that we've given is building a sub-program that would include just the additional learning support reviews. I've also worked with providers that are working towards building sub-programs that contain not only the reviews, but may contain supporting activities. For example, they may build a sub-program that's specifically related to learners living with neurodiversity. They may, on the flip side of that, create another sub-program that's specifically related to learners living with a hearing impairment. So you can really use it in quite interesting ways, not just for compliance, but also thinking about, once again, that road to outstanding and how we can help our learners achieve at pace within curriculum. Wider learning opportunities as well. So I think about safeguarding, prevent, British values, well-being are some of the really obvious ones that come to mind, and we're seeing increasingly providers use sub-programs to build those as their own separate thing. What that means is that as a provider, you can make a decision. So you can say, actually, across every program, we want to deliver safeguarding in this way. Therefore, once you make that decision, if that's a decision you would like to make, every learner that comes to you as a provider, they will be given that wider learning sub-program. The flip side of that, so if we don't have a sub-program, means that every area of curriculum has to build their own approach to safeguarding. So for managers that are in the room, maybe the curriculum managers that are amongst us, will see that there's a real benefit there, so that we know exactly what's been delivered. When it's been delivered, we can standardize our approach. We can, think about our quip. We can think about how we'd like to respond to any feedback we've had in preparation for our SAT, and we can be completely confident about our approach to wider learning because we've built it as a sub-program and we've standardized our approach to it. So absolutely, wider learning presents this great opportunity. We can also think about wider learning, just to give you some more kind of bespoke examples. Some people build sub-programs to capture careers and learner progression. If you make a habit of reading Ofsted reports, which of course we do, and we'll know that this comes up increasingly, particularly for providers that are good and looking at that road to outstanding. So we can use sub-programs to capture that, and once again to standardize our approach, so that if we get asked the question or we're asked to present our evidence, we can go directly to where we need to find that evidence. Interestingly, I've seen one provider do something quite nice with this one as well. One of their challenges was, how do we really know our learners? So moving away from compliance and thinking about all of the questions we ask at the start of the journey, but how do we really know what that starting point is for our learner through conversation, through just gathering other elements of data. So they're looking at building a careers development sub-program that aims to capture all of that. So once again, when we ask that question, from Ofsted or any other external eyes on us, we can go straight to those sub-programs and know that yes, we've tackled that, we understand our learners, and we can go straight to that piece of evidence when required. Another interesting example is EPA progress, and I quite like this one. I like them all actually, but I really like this concept, because once again, as a provider, you may make a decision to say, actually, we would like to standardize our approach to EPA. So no matter which program a learner's on, we want to be assured that they, for example, I'm not saying this is the right way to go for in any way, but for example, we may want to know that they have had their EPA assessment guidance, they have had an introductory conversation, they may have an EPA check-in, they may have an EPA mock, and they may have, not may have, but will certainly have the gateway review. And we could standardise that across the board. If that's a decision we'd want to make, sub-programs are absolutely a great option for this, because then every learner can have that very same sub-program, and that allows your curriculum team to build in their own curriculum, their own EPA levels of, I suppose, difference within their own program, because of course we're not going to hit everything there. We'll have specifics around a specific EPA journey that need to be layered in, but we can certainly use sub-programs to standardise some of the main functions of EPA, or some of the main learning outcomes. We can also use sub-programs to think about specialisms and pathways within curriculum. So let us look at how this presents in Aptem. So if you've not seen Aptem yet, or again, you're very, very new to the journey, what we're looking at now is a learner's profile. So each learner's profile within Aptem has actually got 2 pages. So we can find the second page by selecting the name of the learner, and this reveals our page 2. And once again, I am going to show you this live in a moment as well. So we can see that the name of our learner, I am ever so practical, it's called Sub-Program Demo. And they are on the Team Leader Level 3 program. So you can see in my example, I have left the main aim alone. That's all it is, and it only includes the standard. But then within that, this learner actually requires a number of different sub-programs. So this learner required Functional Skills Level 2 English. So in this example, I didn't need to touch that program, because what I've done is brought in a sub-program called Functional Skills Level 2 English that I'd built previously and added that to that learner. I've also added CMI Level 3, the diploma in the Principles of Management and Leadership. So once again, what this means is that I could have a number of different learners all on Team Leader, but each one of those learners could have different functional skills being laid in. So we don't have, they could have English and maths, they could have various different versions of this. each one being on its own thing, but me as a manager still being able to manage that effectively as well. And we can see some of these different qualifications listed down below. I'm not going to discuss that section in lots of detail, but if you do want to know a little bit more, please do refer to any of our webinars or articles on registration and certification to understand how you can build this section in a little bit more detail. And this one, again, does relate to registration and certification, but it's just to showcase to you really that when you build a sub-program into the system, you can build this in quite a specific way, which allows you to track specifically the registration and certification of that particular element. So you can see here, I've got quite an unusual named sub-program called Wider Learning because I've made it up. It's not a qualification aim, but I can still track what I want to do with that sub-program through Aptem. So I can see here that I can see whether I've registered, whether I've got a planned achievement claimed, etc. So once again, this does relate to registration and certification, so do refer to one of those webinars if you would like to see a little bit more. Once I've layered in my sub-programs for that particular learner, the section registration and certification does allow me to select all of the sub-programs that learner, so you can see here I've got a sub-program demo, and you can see all of the different learning outcomes or different additionalities that I've laid in. So it does allow me to export that as CSV. And if I was kind of looking at that data, I'd want to potentially pull that into, Power BI or something so that I could understand maybe the correlation between functional skills and withdrawal rate in learning. And it just gives me that nice data point to be able to do something like that. So let us look at some examples. So to do that, I'm just going to jump into my own tenancy. I'm just going to check my screens for a moment. Yes, I'm in the right place, so that's brilliant. And I'm going to jump back into Classic actually, just for a moment, just have a look at where we would build this. This isn't a webinar where we are looking at building programs, so I'm just very briefly going to show you that when we build sub-programs in Aptem, we go into the program section, which is one of our configuration elements, and we build in a sub-program here. So I am going to click yes, just for demonstration purposes, just so you can see. And you'll notice that if you've never built a sub-program before, but you're comfortable with main delivery programs, you'll know that the configuration tools are limited here. But this should tell you that actually you can add all these different layers in. So you can have a sub-program with its own competencies, its own duration, it can have its own section of reviews, it can also have its own ILR and its own learning plan, of course. But there is a limited, as I've mentioned, limited configuration there as well. So let us have a look at our learner. Please do bear in mind that I am in a test tenancy environment. Everything you're about to see is for test purposes only. So if you do see anything that you would deem kind of sensitive information, it's all fake. So don't worry. We are not showcasing anything we shouldn't do yet. So this is my learner here, sub-program demo, and I can see my overall aim, start date and end date, and I can see they're an active learner. So let's have a look at them. So as I mentioned, to reveal page 2 of a learner's page, we would have to hit the name of the learner to reveal this second page. Program details are contained in program details. And for those of you that are not, particularly familiar with Aptem, like I said, you may be at the start of your journey or may not necessarily have to look at this. This particular section here actually shows us kind of a snapshot of the ILR, really. And to show a little bit more detail, I hit the pencil. So I can see and edit this particular screen. So I can see here, this learner is on the Team Leader Level 3 program. I can see my key summary with my start dates and end dates, and I can see that I've got some planned hours in here that is pulling from the main delivery program, which is in excess of my minimum required hours as would be expected. And down at the bottom here, I can now see the sub-programs that have been layered in for this particular learner. So we can see that this learner has not only got functional skills now, they've also got, and the CMI Level 3 diploma, but they've also now got support reviews that are being delivered or assigned to Claire Sykes. We've also got wider learning that once again has been assigned to me. And one of the lovely things here that you can do with sub-programs, and is actually critical, I think, to be honest, is that you can assign it to various different tutors. So tutors can access, and can have data that's specifically related to them with regards to their sub-programs. And functional skills is the most obvious example. In most of these cases, it's probably still going to be the main tutor, but for functional skills, we'd certainly expect that in 99% of cases, that's going to be a different tutor. So absolutely, you can assign that to a different tutor if you'd like to. One of the questions that I often get asked is, how easy is it to add a sub-program? So I'm going to show you that as well. So once a sub-program is built, and I want to add it to this learner, so I'm just going to hit add, I'm going to hit sub-program, and I'm going to bring this one in here, your development and coaching, and I'm going to add that. So I didn't time that, but I think that was probably less than 3 or 4 seconds just to bring that in. And you can see here that Aptem is immediately starting to throw me a warning because it wants me to be aware, and because it is a compliance related tool, that I'm doing something wrong. So I'm just going to delete that out. There you go. And once again, you can just see how quickly we can get rid of a sub-program as well. Each one of your sub-programs here will be listed in the training plan, because the training plan is an automated feature within Aptem, and it will be listed as an additional milestone. So let's now think about what this looks like for our learner. So let's jump into the learning plan for this particular learner. You'll notice that I've got a filter on, because in the learning plan we can apply filters. So I'm just going to take that off. And I'm going to just rejig this. Yes, there we go. So we've got an expand all. For all intents and purposes, within Aptem, as an administrator, I see pretty much the same as what a learner sees, with some differences, but I'm not looking at the screen today as a learner for that reason, because I don't need to. But what I'd like you to see is that as a learner, the Aptem learning plan is extremely logical. So when you apply a learner to a learning plan, the learning plan starts at a specific date. So once you've applied your dates, we've got our completion dates or timeframes here, and the learning plan just runs from start to finish, and it is super logical. And one of the things that we absolutely do see within Aptem, and I haven't got data to hand to prove this to you other than what I see in individual tenancies, is that engagement increases with regards to active learning. And I firmly believe it's because of this. It's because learning is so easily accessed, it's intuitive, and it's logical when we start to apply dates to the system. You'll notice here that this learning plan has got all of the sub-programs in, but there is no way at this point for the learner to tell that anything's any different. So I know that, let me just start at the top. So I know that from there to there, so all of these activities here, I know because I built them, are all parts of sub-programs, and there are lots of other things in here as well. But learner doesn't see that. Learner just sees a nice logical learning plan. They can filter and they can find it if they want to, so they can see, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment, but you can see how easy it is for learner to access all of this stuff, which is a little bit different to other learner management systems, where a learner, for example, functional skills, would potentially have to open up that element specifically, and again, that presents a bit of an opportunity for me, for a learner to opt out of a certain thing. And one of the examples that I think that I wouldn't be alone in saying that this is an example that we see is safeguarding and prevent and British values. It's often one of the ones that learners kind of vote with their feet on and just don't see as important. But you can see in an Aptem learning plan, no learning is any more valuable than anything else, because it all just falls into a logical order. But if I apply my filters here, I can see that I can select any one of my sub-programs. So let's just have a look at these so you can see. So here I have this filter. So this is my CMI program. And again, just for the purposes of today, I haven't built curriculum out in any amazing way. I've just put some very basic things in here. So I wouldn't want anybody to look at this and think, this is my idea of best practice around a diploma outcome. But you can see that these are the outcomes that I've put in specifically for that particular sub-program. And then once again, if I look at functional skills, here we have it. I've just got a very few learning outcomes for functional skills. You'll notice here that for this one, although our start date was in April, the learning here has started in July, and is certainly something that we see across the sector for functional skills, that we've got a different starting point for functional skills compared to the main aim. Many providers go either at the start, so they'll front end that, or they'll go at some point after 42, but certainly well within the end date of an apprenticeship programme. We've also got support reviews here as well, so you can see that they have been putting for the learner, and because a sub-programme can be applied at any point, if we pick that up through the system, or a tutor identifies a learner living with neurodiversity, we can apply the funding at any point, and therefore we can apply the support reviews at any point as well. If you would like to know any more about how you can use Aptem to drive compliance and reviews through the use of reviews and trackers, we did do a webinar on this a couple of months ago, so do refer back to that one because it's quite an interesting concept. In addition, we've got the wider learning, and again, I've not put anything massively exciting in there, just some of the real common ones that we see, and we've got that wider learning sub-programme all contained in May. And there are many different ways that we can achieve this, but these are just some examples of how we can do that. So I'm going to open this up again, so let's just get rid of those filters. So now if I open it up, you'll possibly remember some of the things that we saw a moment ago. So you can see now how all of them elements are just dropping into that learning plan here nice and easily. And if I jump into the dashboard for this learner, let's think about what this is telling us. So the dashboard for this learner is telling me that that learner is on team leader level 3, and I've built a couple of those sub-programs quite specifically using the qualification token to ensure that the progress against those qualifications is also pulling through to the dashboard. And once again, I'm not going to go into lots of detail on that today, but if you do want to know how to achieve that specific element on a dashboard, do refer to either your implementation consultant or any member of the team, and we can discuss that concept with you if that's not something that you've come across before. So I'm going to, we're approaching 40 minutes. So let us complete our journey there. There's nothing else particularly that we need to look at. Yeah, I'm just checking. Nothing else particularly we need to look at. So if we have got any questions, I'm going to invite James back on mic, if that's okay. And let's see if we've got anything coming through.
Hi Claire, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Perfect, excellent. So I've had a couple of questions through. I've answered all of them in the chat for people. Obviously, if anybody on the webinar does have any other questions, please do feel free to add them now as well. However, there is one that I would at least like to draw to your attention because I think it's worth asking for everybody's benefit. So it is, if a sub-program is accidentally deleted or removed, once reinstated, would the information still be available, or would any progress within the sub-program be reset?
So Aptem does remember. So, and again, James will jump in on this if there's anything I'm saying that's inaccurate or I've not quite got this right. But Aptem does remember everything. So what this doesn't just apply to sub-programs, but this actually applies to any program. So if you do accidentally remove something from a learner, if you reapply that to that learner, then that learning will be reinstated. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, James? Have I missed anything just in answering that question?
No, absolutely not. That's perfect. The only thing that I would add is that if the intention was to reset the progress, then you would need to create a brand new to that learner sub-program and apply that as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, brilliant.
We've had another question just come through briefly, so I'll break it down into parts for you, Claire. So how do you withdraw a learner from a sub-program if they've started it, but then it turns out they don't need it? For example, if they find their previous certificates after receiving learning.
That's a really, really great question, actually, and it's probably more complex than what we think. So I think that we're asking about withdrawing, so the physicality of withdrawing, for example, the component aim3. So there are
Yep.
two answers to this question. So if we go into the second page of this particular section, you'll notice here, if I jump into the pencil of program, I can delete that particular subprogram, and that's okay. That's okay for me to do there. But in addition to that, you may want to refer to your ILR to understand whether that component aim3 has actually pulled through to the ILR and does need to be removed there as well. And because we're not ILR consultants really, I'm going to stop there, and I would just ask you to refer to your ILR specialist within your own team. But absolutely, those two things should be checked off.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I can't see any other questions coming through at the moment, so we'll give
Brilliant.
people a couple of minutes if that's the case. But is there? Yeah, I don't think we've got anything else at the moment, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. That's been great. I hope that's been really useful for everybody. And once again, if there's anything else, any additional support that anybody would require, please do get in touch with us, and we'd be more than happy to talk you through any of the details that we've covered today. So shall we officially close there, James, if we've got nothing else coming through?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just going to double check again. Yeah, we haven't got any other questions coming through. So once again, everybody, thank you for your time this morning. Hope you found it useful. And as mentioned at the start, we will make this recording available for you as part of the Aptem Help Centre.
Thank you, everybody.